Hello everyone, we hope you're all doing very well. Today we're going to look at the various conditions for takeoff and landing for the free mod for the T-45C Goshawk. We're going to look at takeoff and landing on supercarrier, legacy carrier and airfield. We're going to do it relatively quickly. Note that we did not have any documentation with this free mod, so everything we've taken out of the NATOPS manual. First of all, prior to taxi, first let's check if we have wheel chocks on or not. F2 to external view, and we do not have wheel chocks. If we did, we'd have to request them to be removed. To do that, communications menu, ground crew, and we would have options there as relevant. Next, parking brake. We want to check that it is turned off. It's in the forward position when it's turned off, and we can see it is in the forward position. Anti-skid off. Check. Again, before we taxi, flaps to full. Flaps and slats to full. And you can see we're down at full. Hook bypass to carrier in this case. And pitch trim, we're going to set plus 3.5 degrees, and we can monitor there. So let's just get that sorted. I rate that as 3.5 degrees. Now we're going to taxi. Let's keep the speed nice and slow, and we're going to use our nose wheel steering button, push and hold, to give us extra steering gain. As far as interacting with the flight crew on the supercarrier, it's going to be exactly the same as the Hornet, so we're not going to go into too much detail, but we're going to park ourselves in front of the JBD here and wait for instruction from the ground crew. Obviously I've got my Simba here doing his thing, and our crew are probably not going to activate until he's all hooked up and ready. Hey, right, now we're in business. Let's go forward. Okay, it's very easy in this aircraft to overshoot the steam lug, so we're just going to follow his orders exactly. Wait for further orders. Obviously we want to keep aligned as we can to the catapult when getting this position. Launch bar down. Zap. Going to hook us up. Right, this bit can be a little bit awkward, so full power. Hey, got it first time. Wait for further instruction. Launch bar up. Got the signal to run up. We're just going to double check everything. Control augmentation not modelled. Anti-skid done. Flaps, slats, check. Trim, check. Canopy, check. Harness not modelled. Seat not modelled. We are going to wipe the stick. We're going to wipe the rudder. We're going to full power. And obviously to salute, we're going to press that command there. We're going to feather the stick with our hand, but no input. As we go off the end, depending on our weight, we may need some slight aft stick. Pressing launch now. Okay, feels good. Tiny bit of aft stick. Gear up. Flaps up. Check indicator lights. We're now on the legacy carrier. All of our steps are going to be the same until we get to the catapult. So flaps are down, trim is set, anti-skid is off, parking brake is off, hook bypass set to carrier. We want to position our front nose wheel as close as we possibly can to the lug, because there's no carrier group to help us obviously. So we're going to use an F2 view to help us. And brakes on. Launch bar down. Press U, uniform key, to hook up. And we will have automatic hookup. On the legacy carrier, we do not have to salute. Instead, we just go full power and it will trigger the launch. Do all of your checks as we did before. Full power. We go. Gear up. Flaps up. Ready to rock and roll. Now let's take off from an airfield. Prior to taxi, check that we don't have our blocks and remove if required. Next, ensure that our parking brake is off, so it's pushed in, and check that our toe brakes are keeping us in place. Next, anti-skid is going to be on. Ensure that hook bypass set to field. Trim is going to go up to 3.5 standard again. Flaps are going to go into half position, so one increment down and wait for the indicator. Release toe brakes, taxi to runway at, I guess what you could consider a human running speed, about 15 knots or so. No way of measuring it. Obviously using our rudder to turn left and right, and nose wheel steering high gain if you need it. We'll quickly talk through the takeoff procedure before we do it. So we're going to have our tow brakes on, we're going to spool to maximum power, the tow brakes off, use a rudder control to keep us centralised on the runway. In the current configuration, the aircraft will actually rotate itself off the airfield at about 120 knots. Now that's going to change if you're in a heavy configuration, especially with weapons, so it's weight dependent. If you are heavy, then at around 120 knots, you're going to use some slight aft stick to rotate the aircraft to about 10 degrees angle of attack. Once she's airborne, we're going to continue a positive rate. Gear and flaps should be up by 140 knots, and the no exceed speed of the gear and flaps is 200 knots. So in this case, we're going to essentially let the aircraft take off itself because we are lightly loaded. Lead, take it away. Ready?
Brakes.
Taking herself off. Gear up. Flaps up.
Up. Holding pre-pitch.
Roger. I'm going to slightly de-trim here because we're getting faster. And that's it. The only thing is that I was actually a bit heavier than I thought I was, so she took a little further, higher than 120 knots before she became airborne. We got airborne about 130, but otherwise nothing to report. Next it comes to landing. We're going to work on the carrier first, then we're going to do an airfield landing. We're going to do what I'd call a simplified circuit in each case, just to keep things super simple and easy to remember. So we're going to have a circuit altitude of around 1,000 feet, and it will get down to about 700 feet as we get round to our base turn. Our circuit speed will be 250. We've got a little bit slow here, but we will get back up to 250. Once we've done our brake, and in both cases are on our downwind, we will change to be on speed. I'll explain what that is when we get there. When doing that, our gear will come down and our flaps will come down to full. We'll approach the carrier from the rear and the right, and we will brake left once we've passed the carrier. So off we go. Work our way up to 250 again. The HUD's a bit difficult to read, but take a note of our current heading of 305 because we're going to have to find the reciprocal very shortly. Once we pass the carrier by a mile or so, we're going to brake, we're going to reduce the throttle, and we're going to work our way to sub 200 knots, keeping our altitude at roughly 1,000 or slightly below. Once below 200 knots, gear can come out, flaps first stage can come down, flaps second stage can come down, hook can come down. In fact, I should make a note that usually the hook would come down before we enter the circuit. But I've started, in this case, with it up. Keep turning, keep reducing speed to about 140 until we hit our reciprocal heading of around 125. Just roughly working out in my head. We're a little bit low there. Keep checking our carry for reference. A little bit slow as well, a bit more power on. And okay, let's pause there and just look at our symbology. We will now be moving from circuit speed to on speed. On speed means that we are going to achieve and maintain our landing angle of attack. Depending on your weight, the actual speed you're going to achieve that landing angle of attack at will be different. Symbologies. Velocity vector here. This guy shows where we are actually going. Angle of attack error bracket here. We want to, from now on, maintain the error bracket so that it is centered here as best we can in terms of up and down on the HUD with the vertical velocity here. That will keep us on our angle of attack on speed. Similar thing here, angle of attack indexer. If this guy shows we are too fast, our angle of attack is too low. If this guy shows we are too slow, our angle of attack is too high. If this guy shows exclusively in the middle, our angle of attack is good, and therefore we are on speed. That is what we want to maintain. We also want to trim on speed, and I'll show you what that means. We just get on this reciprocal a little better. Whoops, trimming now. Shifted below 1,000 feet a little, and that's, we can live with that. I'm currently manipulating the throttle and the trim to get us trimmed on speed. It's going to take me a couple of miles because I'm a bit rusty, but I think just about get it. Okay, we're just about there now. Took a mile or so, but what we've got now is we're in a position where our index of bracket here shows we're on speed. Our angle of attack here, bracket here, shows we are near as damn it on speed. As well as that, our velocity vector here is on the horizon line, and we're trimmed at a position in terms of pitch, 5.5 degrees, which means that it will maintain this attitude without any stick input. This keeps everything nice and neutral. Without doing that, you're going to have the stick pulled highly back a lot of the time, and that's going to be very hard to land. So this neutralizes everything in terms of trim on speed. All we've got to do now is just literally fly another, I could turn in now, I suppose, but another mile I think I'll go just to make it safe. We'll then do a left base turn. We'll arrive on our radial of the runway, which we can check visually with our eyes. We won't need symbology for that. And then we'll start our final. So on this aircraft, I can't show you my controls, unfortunately, so you just have to kind of listen to the engine to know what I'm doing. I'm going to make my turn now. It's going to be a relatively aggressive turn in that it's got to match the turn radius that I did for my brake. 800 feet. It's fine at the moment. Got slightly too fast there, as you can see. Maintaining 800 feet. Expediting the turn. See the ball symbology's popped up now. We'll go through that in just a second. And that's us lined up okay on the radial, and we're going to just talk now. Ball symbologies come up here. When we get within 3/4 of a mile, we'll have a dot appear here that we want to keep vertically centered along these axes here. You can see that I've messed my radial up slightly. I've gone between that radial, and that's just my error, but we've got a mile and a half or so, and we can correct that relatively easily. We've got a little bit faster, as you can see. The error bracket is too high, and we can correct that relatively easily. In terms of attitude now, we want the velocity vector here to point, I would say, roughly at the wire number 4 in the middle of the wire, while maintaining our on-speed symbology. Quick check while we're paused. Gear is down, 3 greens for the gear, and a green for flaps. And we're going to unpause. We're a little faster. We're going to come off slightly. We're going to adjust left of the radial to bring us onto radial. Power back on. Maintain our angle of attack. A little slow. Maintain the velocity vector. Height wise on wire 4. We can bring it into the wire, the center line now. We're going to make no adjustments and just plant it in there. Just grabbed a wire. Oops. I think I broke something. That appears to be something wrong with the aircraft, because that's happened every time I've landed so far. In that, you can see the wire's detached itself. Yet in the plane, it thinks that the wire's still attached. Let's see if this works. So hook up. What I should be able to do is put the hook up and go. That's unfortunately not going to work. Nothing I'll do about that until it gets fixed, so be it. Other things to note that I forgot to say because I was busy is that just before we hit the wire area, we should be going full power in case we miss the wires and we need to go round. We'll need that spool time accounted for. And once we snag the wires and we're sure of it, obviously we can come off the throttle. And usually we would now go and put our hook up and go and taxi. And airfield landing, it's really not going to be that much different. So we are attacking, if you like, the runway from the rear, in that the threshold is closest to us of the runway that we're landing on. We attack it on the right because we're going to be always in the GR doing a left-hand circuit. Circuit altitude is going to be about 1,000 or just below is what we maintain. Speed is going to be 250, so we've got a little slow here, but speed up. We'll just have to ignore the tanks I've left on the end of the runway. That comes for later on. Okay, at your decided point, as we are working our way down the runway, we're going to have a left brake. It's going to be very similar to the brake on the Carrier in that we're going to reduce our speed down to sub 200 while maintaining ASL altitude. Once below 200, gears coming out, first stage of flaps. Haha, watch the giant mountain. It was a bit weird. We'll just pretend that's not there. Going to come out on our reciprocal course here. pause, talk, exactly the same thing. We're going to get our velocity vector in the middle of the error bracket, maintain that and trim it to suit the horizon line so that they're all trimmed and suited, and we are on speed. And the same thing with the indexer here. While we're paused, 3 green, green, obviously we don't need the hook. So let's get that done. Lots of up trim going in here. Slightly below the 1000 that we use in the Grim Reapers, but that's okay, we can allow that. Okay, that's trimmed pretty well on speed there. Check back at the threshold of the runway. I think we're good to turn. Again, because of that mountain, I had to do a super tight radius turn for the brake, so I'm going to have to do the super tight radius turn for here as well. We wanted extra power to maintain our angle of our on-speed speed. When we terminate this base turn into final, then we're going to reduce that power to maintain our on-speed. Transition to final now. Marry up with the radial. Power down. Maintain on speed, so our velocity vector on the error bracket and our velocity vector on the threshold of the runway. Ensure we've got our circle here on the angle of attack indexer. And just drive it into the runway. These naval aircraft, we do not flare like you would with an F-16 or something like that. You literally, they're designed to just bash them into the runway. They have the gear required for that. I just got off speed. Find it very hard to talk through these and drive them. I am no Mr. Wagner. Smash its face into the ground. Off the power. A little bit of rudder left and right to keep her centered. We're on the brakes now. And that is our airfield landing. Neither of those were perfect. Neither of them were even really by the book. Technically, they were our standard circuits that we do in GR. We standardise everything to keep it super simple so that all the aircraft can marry all of the other aircraft. You don't have to remember different procedures for each. You may want to go and read NATOPS and do it perfectly as per the NATOPS. It's also the end of this video. I hope that was useful and see you later.